No maid ever lasted more than a few days with the millionaire's autistic son. He didn't speak, he didn't hug, he didn't even look at them. Most gave up until one of them saw him cry. Not a tantrum, not frustration, but real silent tears, like his whole world had collapsed. In that moment, she understood he wasn't difficult. He was hurting. And while everyone else saw a problem, she saw a child begging to be understood. For the first time, someone stayed. And when his father saw the bond they built, something his money had never been able to buy, he realized what he'd been missing all along. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. Richard Mendelssohn stood in the middle of the living room, his face cold and full of anger. Helena, the housekeeper, stood in front of him, shocked and confused. He was accusing her of stealing something valuable from the house. Helena tried to defend herself, but Richard didn't want to listen. He raised his voice, pointed to the door, and told her to leave immediately. Helena begged for a chance to explain, her eyes full of tears, but he ignored her completely. Her heart was beating fast as she slowly walked to the door. Upstairs, Benjamin was watching everything while hiding behind the staircase. He was 7 years old and autistic, and he didn't understand why Helena, the only person who truly cared for him, was being thrown out like that. In his hands, he held a drawing he made just for her. He watched as Helena, the only adult who made him feel safe, left the house. She was the one who knew when he needed silence. She was the one who always made his food the same way, who counted the stars with him before bed, who never got angry when he couldn't find the words. Benjamin squeezed the paper in his hands, a picture he had carefully colored the night before. It showed Helena smiling, standing next to him under a big sun. He was going to give it to her today, but now it didn't make sense anymore. All he knew was that something very important was being taken away from him, and he didn't know how to stop it. Downstairs, the heavy door slammed shut behind Helena. Richard turned around and went straight to his office without saying anything else, without checking if Benjamin had seen the scene. The house was silent now, too silent, the kind of silence that made Benjamin nervous. He didn't like changes, and this change was huge. He walked slowly down the stairs, still holding the drawing. The house felt different. It wasn't just the absence of Helena, it was like the walls themselves were upset. Benjamin peeked toward the front door. She wasn't coming back. His eyes began to fill with tears, not loud sobbing, just the quiet kind that fell down his cheeks one drop at a time. Helena had always been there for Benjamin. She didn't speak too loudly. She never made sudden moves. She understood that he needed his food on a blue plate, never the red one. She never got upset when he repeated the same sentence over and over again. She knew that his favorite blanket needed to be on the couch every morning. Richard never did any of those things. For Richard, Benjamin was just a quiet boy with strange habits. But to Benjamin, Helena was everything. She was his safe place, his guide, his helper, his friend. Now, she was gone. Benjamin walked to the center of the room and stood there quietly. The drawing was still in his hand, slightly wrinkled now from being held so tightly. He looked at it again. It no longer made him happy. It made him feel more alone. He wanted to give it to her. He wanted her to know that he loved her, but she was gone. After a few minutes, his small hand let go of the paper. The drawing slowly drifted down from his fingers and landed on the floor. That simple piece of paper meant more than anyone else could ever understand. It was a goodbye that Benjamin never got to say. Benjamin sat in the back of the long black limousine. The morning was quiet inside the car, but his thoughts were not. He looked at Anthony, the driver, and asked again, "Why didn't Helena come back to say goodbye?" His voice was soft, but his eyes were serious. Anthony didn't answer right away. "She had to leave quickly," he mumbled, but Benjamin wasn't satisfied. "She always says goodbye." Anthony focused on the traffic lights ahead, not knowing what else to say. Still holding on to the question, Benjamin reached into his backpack and slowly pulled out a small wooden music box. It was light brown, with little painted stars on the lid. Helena had given it to him when he turned 6. It had become part of his routine. Every morning he turned the key and listened to the soft tune before school. Today, he turned the key just like always, but nothing happened. No sound came out. He tried again. Still nothing. His fingers started moving in small, repetitive patterns, tapping the corners of the music box. Anthony noticed. He knew this wasn't about the box not working. It was about something deeper that the boy couldn't put into words. Benjamin kept his eyes on the box. He wasn't angry. He wasn't crying. He was just stuck in a moment that didn't make sense. Helena used to sit beside him on the ride to school. She would remind him to breathe slowly when he felt nervous. Now she was gone, and the music was gone too. At a red light, Benjamin looked out the window. He saw a boy about his age laughing and running, pulling his mother along by the hand. They were smiling. He didn't understand why they looked so happy. They didn't seem to have bodyguards or drivers or long black cars, but they looked fine. Benjamin looked back at the music box in his lap. It was still broken. The difference between his world and the one outside felt too big. As the limousine approached the school gate, Benjamin placed the music box carefully inside his backpack and zipped it shut. Anthony opened the door for him. Benjamin hesitated for a second, almost asking one more time about Helena, but instead he just nodded slightly and stepped out. As he walked toward the school building, he didn't look back. Benjamin sat alone on a small bench near the classroom wall. In one hand, he held the drawing. In the other, he held the broken music box. Around him, children chatted loudly about their trips and new games, but none of that made sense to Benjamin. He just sat there trying to stay calm. The room felt too big and too loud. Without Helena, everything was harder. A teacher noticed Benjamin sitting apart and walked over. She smiled and crouched down. "Hi, Benjamin," she said kindly, but he didn't answer. She pointed at the music box. "Is that yours?" He nodded slowly. She reached her hand out. "May I see it?" Benjamin quickly pulled it closer to his chest, shaking his head. He moved his fingers in small patterns on the side of the box, trying to calm himself down. The teacher kept asking questions he couldn't or didn't want to answer. It was too much. He wanted someone who knew how to sit in silence with him, just like Helena used to do. But she wasn't here. At recess, Benjamin stayed near the school entrance, far from the playground noise. He sat on a concrete step, still holding his 2 items tightly. He stared at the school gate without blinking. One by one, mothers began to arrive. They smiled as they greeted their children, fixing their jackets or holding their hands. Benjamin watched every moment. He imagined what it would feel like to have someone waiting just for him. Helena used to walk him to the classroom and wait after school too. He kept watching, hoping maybe her face would appear in the crowd, but it never did. Benjamin sat at one end of the long dining table. His feet didn't reach the floor and his plate was full, but he barely touched the food. Richard sat at the other end, reading something on his tablet. The room was large and quiet. Benjamin moved the mashed potatoes around his plate with his fork. After a few minutes, he looked up and asked, "What does it mean to be fired?" Richard looked up, surprised. "It means someone doesn't work for us anymore." "So Helena was fired because she stole something?" Benjamin asked quietly. Richard didn't respond. He took a sip of water and stared straight ahead. The silence dragged on. Benjamin sat very still. He thought carefully before speaking again. "I won't ever steal anything," he said firmly. "Never, I promise." He said it with such seriousness that it sounded like a rule he had made for himself, a rule to stay safe. Benjamin's fingers tightened around his fork. He had made the promise to make sure he would never be sent away like Helena. In his mind, being fired was the same as disappearing. He believed that if he followed every rule perfectly, maybe his father wouldn't send him away too. Eventually, Richard stood up from the table without looking back. He told Benjamin to go get ready for bed. The boy nodded and climbed the stairs without speaking. He reached his bedroom and opened his backpack. He gently pulled out the music box and sat on the edge of the bed, holding it tightly. After a few minutes, he placed it on top of his bedside table, right next to his reading lamp. To anyone else, it was just a broken toy. But to Benjamin, it was a piece of someone who had mattered, someone who had made him feel seen. Benjamin couldn't sleep. The house was dark and quiet, but not the kind of quiet that helped him rest. He got out of bed slowly. In one arm, he held the folded drawing. In the other, he held the broken music box. He walked slowly through the hallway. Normally, Helena would be around at this time, maybe folding blankets or checking the windows. Now there was nothing, just him. He kept walking until he reached Helena's room. He hadn't gone there since she left. He slowly pushed the door open. The bed was unmade. On the small nightstand, he saw a Polaroid picture. He walked closer and picked it up. It was him and Helena sitting on the grass in the garden. He remembered that day. She had made lemonade, and they had counted ants on the stone path. He stared at the photo for a long time. Then he climbed into the bed, holding the drawing, the box, and now the photo. He curled into the blanket, which still smelled like her. He held the music box close to his ear, even though it was silent. Then he tried to hum the melody himself, very quietly, just a few notes, but he couldn't get it right. His throat tightened and his eyes filled with tears. He stopped trying and just stayed still. The tears ran down his face, but he didn't wipe them away. He missed her in a way he couldn't describe. He didn't want to leave her room. It was the only place in the house that didn't feel completely broken. Richard walked down the hallway late at night and noticed a light still on near Helena's old room. He pushed the door gently and stepped inside. There, sitting on the edge of the bed, was Benjamin. The boy was wearing his pajamas, holding the Polaroid picture and the music box. Richard cleared his throat quietly. Benjamin looked up slowly. Then he asked in a calm but direct voice, "Are you going to fire me too?" Richard stood still, frozen in the doorway, unsure of what to say. Benjamin wasn't angry or yelling. He was just asking something that made sense to him. In his mind, people who did something wrong or were no longer wanted were simply removed. Richard opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. His silence filled the room. Benjamin watched him closely, waiting. "If I do something wrong," he continued, "will you make me leave too?" Richard felt something in his stomach turn. He had been so focused on keeping everything under control that he hadn't noticed what it was doing to his son. Minutes passed. The silence between them was filled with questions and fear. Benjamin finally looked up one more time. "I don't want to leave," he said, "even if I make a mistake." That sentence made Richard's chest feel tight. Richard slowly got down on one knee in front of Benjamin. "Benjamin," he said, "I would never send you away. Never. You're my son." But as he finished, Benjamin looked at him straight in the eye and interrupted. "You sent Helena away because she understood me more than you do." The words were calm, but they hit like a sharp object. Richard's body stiffened. That sentence forced Richard to stop pretending he had all the answers. Helena had understood Benjamin's world in a way Richard never had. She had been patient when Richard was rushed. She had noticed the small signs, the quiet routines, the invisible signals. Richard realized he hadn't just removed an employee. He had taken away the person who had created the most safety in his son's life. Not because of any real wrongdoing, but because deep down, Richard had felt left out, replaced. As Richard sat there, overwhelmed by guilt, something unexpected happened. His throat tightened, and he felt tears forming in his eyes. He tried to blink them away, but it didn't work. One tear fell, followed by another. He was crying in a quiet, painful way he couldn't control. It was the first time Benjamin had ever seen his father cry. Richard covered his face for a moment, but it was too late. His strong image was gone. He lowered his hands and looked at his son again. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I really am." Benjamin didn't answer, but he looked at his father longer than usual, holding the broken music box. There was no big moment of forgiveness, no hug. But something had changed. For the first time, Richard wasn't pretending. He was admitting that he had acted out of emotion, out of jealousy, and had hurt his son in the process. Richard walked slowly to his office. He sat down heavily in the chair and stared at the telephone. Then behind him, he heard soft footsteps. He turned and saw Benjamin standing there, holding the music box tightly. The boy didn't say anything. He just looked at his father with a calm, serious expression. Richard took a breath and turned back to the phone. He knew what he had to do. He hesitated, but then looked at Benjamin again. The boy hadn't moved. He was still watching. Richard knew this was about showing his son what it meant to take responsibility. He slowly picked up the phone and dialed. The phone rang, then a voice answered. "Hello?" It was Helena. Richard cleared his throat. "It's me," he said. "I know I don't have the right to ask, but I'm calling because I made a mistake. I need to ask you to come back, not as an employee, but because Benjamin needs you, and so do I." Helena didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but firm. "You fired me without listening. You hurt me." Richard nodded. "I know I was wrong. I let my own feelings get in the way." Another pause. Then Helena said, "I'm not coming back for you. I'm coming back for Benjamin. He didn't deserve what happened." Richard felt something loosen in his chest. He looked up at Benjamin, who had quietly stepped forward. The boy placed the music box gently on the corner of the desk next to the phone. He didn't say a word, but his action meant everything. "She's coming back," Richard said softly. Benjamin nodded. He didn't jump with joy, but he stepped forward and leaned against the side of the chair. It wasn't a hug, but it was trust beginning to return. Richard gently placed his hand on Benjamin's back, guiding him toward the couch. They both sat down. Then Benjamin did something unexpected. He leaned to the side and rested his head on Richard's shoulder. It was small, quiet, but it broke every wall that had stood between them. Richard didn't move. He stayed completely still. Benjamin's head was warm and heavy on his shoulder. Then, in a soft voice, Benjamin whispered, "Thank you for not firing me." Richard felt his throat tighten. That was how Benjamin saw love, something that could be taken away at any moment, just like a job. As Benjamin's breathing began to slow, Richard stayed awake, knowing this was one of the most important moments of his life. The morning light began to spill through the large windows. Benjamin slowly opened his eyes, still holding the music box. He quickly got out of bed and went to the hallway. When he reached the front hall, he stopped. Then the doorbell rang. Without hesitating, he ran to the door and pulled the handle. There she was, Helena, standing there with her bag, eyes kind as always. Before she could say anything, Benjamin wrapped his arms tightly around her. Helena froze for half a second, then wrapped her arms around him. "I missed you," she said gently. Richard stood a few steps back, watching. He didn't move forward, didn't interrupt. He realized Helena's presence filled the house in a way he never could. Helena slowly pulled back and reached into her pocket. "I have something for you," she said. She handed Benjamin a small wrapped object. "Before I left, I fixed your music box." Benjamin tore the paper carefully. It was his music box, the one she had fixed. He twisted the key. A moment passed, and then the sound came. Soft, clear, familiar. The melody filled the room. His face lit up as the song played. To Benjamin, the melody wasn't just a tune. It was a sign that things could go back to the way they were. He sat down on the step near the front door, still holding the box. For the first time, he didn't look nervous. He looked at ease. Richard walked closer, understanding that this moment belonged to Benjamin and Helena. The mansion, once cold and heavy, now felt alive. The melody was proof that something broken could be fixed. It was proof that love could come back. And as the tune played, Richard finally understood that being a father meant helping the people your child needs stay close no matter what. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.